most interesting part about Expedition 33 to me is this ongoing, underlying in the background story discussing mental health, as well as grief and loss. And we see that in all facets of the game, from the way that the citizens of Lumiere react to the Gommage, to the Descendre family, to the way even the Nevrons respond in world. The citizens of Lumiere are constantly being faced with the threat of the Gommage. The Descendre family is processing the loss of Verso. Even the environmental storytelling within the world all share this ongoing story about grief. Hi, hello everyone, my name is Jer, and if you are just meeting me for the first time, I am still growing this channel. I would love it if you hit subscribe and let me know if you like these kind of videos, because I would love to do more of them. I want to discuss Expedition 33 today, and I want to talk about something that I haven't seen very much of in my recommended, and that is about this ongoing story of grief and loss. And I want to initially share the thesis of this video. There is no right or wrong way to process grief and loss. Whatever your unique healing process is yours. And that will be a running theme throughout this video. Let's talk about the grief cycle rapidly in case you've not heard of it. Think of it less as steps that you have to follow and more like a buffet that you can go back to. You may never grab every single thing there. First on the cycle is denial. The long and short of denial is that you're unable to process that something has happened and you keep rejecting the concept that it has. There's bargaining, very similar to denial, but this time you're maybe competing with something physical to try and get that person back. There are the very constant thoughts that a lot of people have. If only I had done this, maybe then this would not have happened. If only I had spent more time with them, maybe they wouldn't be gone now. There's anger, which is pretty self-explanatory. There's depression, another very easy to understand concept that isn't always so black and white. Depression doesn't always manifest as sitting in a corner and crying. It can manifest as numbness. And then there's acceptance, where you have realized that the person is gone, you are at peace that they are gone, and you're able to move forward. Now again, just because you've hit one stage of the grief cycle doesn't mean that you are completely done with it. You could be in acceptance and fully understand that your loved one has perished. But maybe years down the road, something reminds you of them and you're right back into a sadness, or you're bartering to try and figure out how you could have kept them alive or still with you somehow. And then you go back to acceptance. Again, there's no right or wrong way, and that is the general theory of this video. The overarching theory is that imposing your viewpoint about how to grieve on anybody else is unhealthy. Some people process a loss traumatically, and some people retreat into themselves, and others are able to move on very quickly, or at the very least compartmentalize until they're able to get to a place of healing. And we see that manifest throughout the entire game from every single character, including the main cast as well as the Descendre family. And so keep these steps in mind because we'll continue to refer back to them. So here's what we know about the Descendre family. We have Renoir. He is the patriarch of the group. He keeps everything together and running. We know that he was not a painter before and that he was taught by his wife how to create. We see in Renoir's drafts that everything is a little rudimentary. Everything is black and gold. There's not a lot of color or intensity, implying that Renoir is someone who very much sees the world in very specific shades, and those shades don't involve a lot of complexity. Everything is simple in his world, in his drafts within the painting. And we only get to see small glimpses of each one of the family members within the context of Verso's overall creation. But we can gather a lot of information about who that person is, a psychological profile, if you will, of these characters. We see with his relationship with his wife, his immediate thought is that she's spending too much time in the canvas. Very similar to an Inception, where Mal is spending so much time obsessing over this world and wanting to keep creating. She's lost sense of reality and is no longer in touch with who she is. And so her husband tries desperately to figure out a way to bring her out of that fugue state so that she can be into the land of the living. And we see that that causes more harm than good, because she continues to grieve this world that is missing, that she doesn't even know if it's real. That is a different story and far more complex, but similar lines to a piece of media that maybe people are familiar with. In this world, Renoir sees that Aline is struggling to connect with Verso's death. He sees that she has created this painted version of their family in this world that she can keep revisiting. She is very classically bargaining, but we're not talking about her yet. Renoir sees this and feels this need to pull her out. He thinks that what she is doing grief-wise is not leading to a resolution. It's not allowing her to heal. We see his interaction with Alicia / Maëlle as the game goes, that he believes with his whole heart that his family needs to get out of this painting and get to what is at hand, which is this war between the painters and the writers. He wants to figure out how to deal with Verso's death, but we don't see precisely how he intends on dealing with that, if he wants to at all or intends to at all. I think when you look at the psychological profile of this character, we can very clearly see that he is focusing on everybody else. He is not working on his own loss, his own trauma of losing his son. We see a very clear picture of how Aline has dealt with this, but we don't get a lot of insight into where Renoir is, other than continuing to focus on everybody but himself. In the final fight, when he is discussing with Maëlle what to do, she has to convince him to see her as an equal, as someone who has complex thoughts that he can trust to make the right decision to get out of this painting and to deal with things as necessary so that he can take care of Aline. And through his obsession with the painting and needing to destroy it and get out of it and get his family safe from it, we can almost parse that there's a denial aspect of the way that he's grieving. He can't process quite that Verso is gone, so he focuses on everyone else around him and micro-policing their behavior so that he doesn't have to focus on himself. That is very classic denial, refusing to deal with your own sadness and focusing on how other people are dealing with theirs. He might not be ready, no matter how much time has passed. He's very clearly not in a mental place to deal with it, and with his wife and his daughter both sort of defying the way that he lives his life, he's able to hyper-focus on them and not think about Verso. In these moments where we see painted version of Renoir interact with Verso, even though that's not him, the actual him, it's a painted version that Aline created, he's pretty firm and staunch and kind of harsh. He says, "I've spent too much time away from my family. I need my family back." He's focusing on them, not so much about who Verso is. And so you can parse from this that he very classically is dealing with denial, on a whole, I would say. Next up is Aline, the paintress, the matriarch of the Descendre family. She is the one that taught everyone how to paint. She was the one who encouraged Verso in his music, and we see in the black and white flashbacks within the monolith that Aline was most involved with everyone. She kind of is the glue of the family. Without her, none of them would be able to do what it is they do, which is paint. She is the one who struggles, I think, kind of the hardest with losing Verso. And we see that by her delving into the painting, creating this extra family, realizing this world that didn't get to exist so that she can just have a little more time. When she meets up with the group at the very end, right before the fight with the paintress, her immediate thought is, we need to go home. And Verso says, yes, you need to go home. She is unable to connect with this death in a realistic way because she keeps bargaining. She can create a version of Verso, so she does. She can play out this life that will never happen, and she avoids her own trauma to have another life, a false sense of life. We'll sometimes see people get a dog and they'll name that dog after their dead kid or after their dead spouse, or they'll get a figurine of some kind that they talk to, that they visit, shrines within their home that they'll go to, something that is physical that they can pretend is the real thing. They'll take clothing that smells like their loved one and sleep with that at night to have a little piece of them that's nearby. That's the closest that we can have in our own world. But in this world, Aline can have an actual talking version of Verso. And in Act 3, a song that plays continually says, I hear you, I see you, I feel you. This song that plays in the overworld is very clearly a cry from Aline that she can see her family. She knows they're real, she knows they're there, and she needs that to keep going. Again, referring to the statement of this video, there's no correct way to grieve. If someone chooses bargaining, that is how they have to process. And what has happened with Aline and Renoir is they are not seeing eye to eye. They either have discussed how they feel and have not seen eye to eye, or Renoir feels like she's had plenty of time to process and put everything away, but she doesn't feel that way. She continues to delve into the painting and spend more and more time there. And what's kind of ironic about all of this is that Renoir says her time in the painting is causing her to deteriorate. She cannot be here much longer or things will get worse. But the reason why she's doubled down so fiercely is because he is at war with her and won't listen to her. She's saying, I am not ready to move on from my son. I do not want to destroy this world. I need this to be a part of my life. I cannot just go home. This must be my reality right now. And instead of listening to her and trusting her to make the best decision, he decides to fight her about it and tries to drag her out, kicking and screaming from the canvas. She then creates this chroma shield and leaves him underneath the monolith, and the two of them spend 60 plus years within this painting fighting each other, not seeing eye to eye. To add to something I did not mention earlier, my degree is in psychology. I spent about 1.5 years in marriage family therapy before having to drop due to financial reasons because college is very expensive. You see this happen a lot in family structures where they'll lose a kid and the parents, whatever issues they had before, are now compacted. The loss of a child doesn't often break a family. It sort of just reveals all the cracks and holes that were already there. The breaks that were getting close are suddenly compounded, and these two levels of the building smush into each other. If you've ever watched a demolition where they'll line the bottom of the building with explosives and then it just collapses on itself, that's sort of what the loss of a child can often do with families, and we very clearly see that happen here. The two of them do not see eye to eye, and they probably always had marriage complications, and we can kind of see echoes of that in the way that Verso perceives his family. In all of the black and white memories in the monolith, we see him interacting with Alicia, we see him interact with Clea, we see him interact with Aline. We don't see a lot of Verso's memories with Renoir, and I think there's a reason for that. I think Renoir is a very detached character, and that continual story is echoed. That even between the way that Verso saw them, the relationship of the family and Renoir was maybe not as strong as it could have been. And so this couple, Renoir and Aline, are fighting for such a long time that their kids now have to get involved in trying to be the adults to get them to come out of this painting. Her isolation affects the entire family, Renoir's aloofness affects the entire family, and we see both Clea and Alicia section off into different camps. Clea is someone who I think we can create a psychological profile that is very clearly anger. She's pragmatic in a lot of ways. Clea's very smart. When we encounter her in the epilogue, her first discussion is, great, you're awake, you need to help. She emotionally and mentally manipulates Alicia into believing that the fire was her fault. Whether or not it was or not, she capitalizes on this guilt that Alicia feels about the fire and losing Verso, and she convinces her that if she wants to make it better, she should get involved and go help the parents. When we actually get into the canvas, we hear her kind of discussing how Alicia has gone about this. Oh, well, you've become a painted copy? That's fine. At least you'll be out of the way and I can work now. I don't need to worry about you any further. To me, on surface level, her behavior comes across very much like she wants to just get her parents out of the canvas so that they can focus on the war that's at hand. She says, we as painters have to deal with the writers or we won't exist anymore. So I think her pragmaticism is almost a shield to cover up how she really feels about everything. So in one way, she's sort of dodging and kind of denying in the same way that Renoir is. We see the way that she interacts in the canvas, that she's also doing a little bit of bargaining. But really all of this is from a place of frustration that she has to be the adult here. She's not the adult, but she has to be because her parents aren't, and her kid sister is kind of just wallowing and is sitting upstairs, lying in her bed, not talking, being a burn victim, and being so annoying about it all. That's the way her actions come across. And so when we get into the canvas and we start interacting with more of the world, we start to learn about these Nevrons and where they came from. When Renoir and Aline started fighting, there were no Nevrons in the world. Not to the extent that we see them now. These Nevrons were created specifically by Clea, and we see that in her fight as well, that she uses Nevrons and paints them to attack you. And that's just one layer of her character and backstory. As we learn more about why these were created, she created the Nevrons to kill expeditioners. She created them so that when the expeditioners died, their chroma would remain in their bodies. At the very end of the game, when you go to fight Renoir and you extract the chroma from all of these expeditioners, it starts to make you wonder why it never left. And it's because the Nevrons were specifically designed to do that. Aline gathers power from chroma, but without the power of the dead expeditioners, or without the power of any additional chroma coming her way, by leaving that locked in their bodies, she's cut off from the only source that would keep her strong, that would keep her fighting Renoir, that would keep her inside the canvas and winning the war, so to speak. She comes off angry in this situation, and she comes off angry during her fight. The way that she continues to heal herself throughout the battle shows her resistance towards leaving in the same way that Aline has, except her desire to stay in the canvas is purely selfish. It's to continue to fight against her mom, to fight against this world and help destroy it. She wants it gone. She needs, again, to get back to life and to reality, and she's sick and tired of being here. Her Nevron Blanche is quite literally meant to destroy any Nevrons that didn't do their initial job, which was to kill expeditioners. We meet throughout the game several white Nevrons, all the way back to the very first level. This Nevron that wants to feel its mistress's light, but it doesn't attack the fellow expeditioners. Lune does not understand this, and Gustav wants to just take it out. But they decide to help it instead, and we learn throughout the game that there are several white Nevrons that were not created the same way. Whatever reason that was, whether they were a prototype, something that was interrupted during the painting process, there are Nevrons that exist that have no desire to kill the expeditioners. When you meet one of them and you attempt to fight it, it says, "No, I don't want this." This is further indication that whatever is quote-unquote defunct about them
is not what Clea's plan was for them.
Considering that she made Blanche to destroy those. All of this continues to echo anger, continues to echo resentment. She is obfuscating from the loss of Verso and focusing on something she can control, which is, in a sense, hitting the wall. We see people when they're angry about a death that break glass or they punch walls, they break furniture because they're so mad. And that's what we see Clair doing as well. And that's how we see her interact with her sister, is with frustration and anger. So then we get to Alicia, the youngest, the most manipulated of the entire bunch. It's unclear if she started the fire or if the writers did, but she feels immense amounts of grief and sadness about this, that she's the reason why Verso is dead. In her reincarnation as Mael, we see her sad, but she doesn't want condolences. She wants to just mourn on her own. She almost kind of lingers in acceptance because she recognizes that people are going to die around her. She is ready to go to the continent and fight the paintress. She's mad and upset that this has happened, but more than anything, she's sad that all of her family have died. She never got to know her family. As she continues through the game, she kind of vacillates between anger, sadness, acceptance, but she sits a lot in this depressed state. You see her in these moments of quiet where she looks like she's about to cry. Almost every moment that you see of her lingering, she is so sad, deeply. It does not help at all that her memories have been painted over, and she has memories of 2 lives. But the sadness that she feels about losing her brother and then losing her replacement father within the canvas are almost debilitating. That when she needs to make her decision at the end of the game, she doesn't know what to do. She is so overwhelmed with this upset that she could lose her brother again, kind of then jumping back to denial, kind of jumping into bargaining. Alicia/Mael is the most complex character in the entire game, and she's meant to be that. She's not meant to sort of be this flat, stagnant image of something, but the main profile and bullet point we constantly get is that she's sad about losing Verso. But there's almost a hope that's within that. But her sadness, while she paints it as being fearlessness, is reckless. She makes this decision to go to the continent years before she needs to, because it doesn't matter if she dies. She's lost hope that she'll have any kind of life anywhere, so she might as well die in the process of getting to her inevitable end. That's where we really see her motivations come through, is in this moment at the beginning of the game where she decides to go with the expedition, because what purpose does she have staying here? It's very classical of people who are depressed. They feel there's no point in living anymore, so they make risky decisions. They are reckless with their behavior because they feel there's no purpose to being safe. And I really love the complexity of Mael in particular, because while that is her main bullet point, she continues to jump between everything, as even we see within her abilities that these different stances that she follows in, her stance in life, her stance in battle is constantly in flux. It never stays at the same place because even she doesn't know how she feels right now. On top of that, she's conflicted. When she finally realizes who she is, she loves her father and she wants to support her father in getting her mother out of the painting, but she doesn't want to destroy it. She wants to keep this bit of Verso here because it's helpful for not only her, but for her mom. She wants to help with Clair in appeasing her, in feeling like Clair's doing something actionable. But she again doesn't want to have that come at risk to her found family that she's currently got. And I find that utterly fascinating as a writing piece, because there are very few characters that are written to be that complex and are that relatable and personable. And then we get to the last member of the Desandra family, and that's Verso, who, much like Alicia/Mael, is the most complex. He pretty much exists in this bullet point of acceptance. Granted, we only see a painted version of Verso. However, from what we can parse through his personality and what he has experienced not only in the canvas, he's lived his life before the painting. He lived his life here. He lived it with expeditioners. He's seen many of his friends come and go, and he's ready to let go. He's ready to no longer be. He feels that his time has come and gone, and he would like to move on. He doesn't want to be trapped here anymore, to be someone's therapy doll. No matter who it is, whether that be Alicia / Maëlle, whether that be Aline or Renoir or Clea or the other expeditioners. He wants to move on. He does not want to be anymore. We can see some of even Verso's true intentions come to fruition with the way that the citizens of Lumiere treat the Gommage. With the exception of some outliers, they're on a whole accepting of the fact that the Gommage is happening. They don't understand why, and they're doing everything they can to stop it so that their friends and family don't have to die. They're not even thinking selfishly. When the expeditioners go to the monolith to destroy the paintress and try and stop the Gommage, they are doing it with the full intention of, we are helping those who come after. We're not thinking about ourselves. They're at peace with dying. Lune and Gustave, even Ciel, have this mindset of keep going, keep living. We can't stop to grieve. We can't stop to be sad. We've already had that. We just accept that this is what it is, and there's not much we can do about it. You could look at that in a sense of denial, that they're refusing to acknowledge that it's happened, but we see that a lot of them face their sadness. We see Ciel when she is talking about her husband, how sad she was as she threw herself in the ocean, wanting to just no longer exist anymore without him. We see Gustave being willing to sacrifice the entire mission to save Maëlle. It's not that grief doesn't exist for these folks, it's that they are almost unanimously at the same conclusion. Death is coming one way or another. There's not much we can do about it, but we can maybe try and help the people that are after us so they don't have to have this same looming, lingering sadness or feeling of doom and dread that's coming. So let's do what we can to help them. And looking at Lumiere and the citizens in it is a sort of microcosm of what's going on within Verso. We can create a psychological profile for Verso that he too is at peace with his own death. That if it had been him, and if it had been Alicia or Clea, Aline or Renoir who died, he would have processed it and understood it. We hear that his childhood was filled with being taught how to paint, but that wasn't his goal. He didn't care much about painting. He did it because it was a family tradition, but it wasn't in his interest line. He liked music, showing this little bit of his personality that no matter what came at him, Verso kind of just did life the way that he wanted to. In Verso's drafts, we see this fun world that is pastel and bright and exciting, so different from everything else that was created. It was his private resort that no one else was allowed in. And we see more of his personality come through. These characters are jovial, they're having a good time, they're not following the rules. The traditional painting within the lines is so opposite of what we see with Renoir, who does see everything sort of black and white, very rigidly. Verso's approach to life is much more whimsical. It's a lot more lackadaisical. And so we can parse again from his story that what's going on with Verso mentally when it comes to grief and loss is sort of just, okay, it happens. I'm going to process this real quick and then move forward. And we see in his interactions with the expeditioners that despite him burying so many of his friends and traveling with so many of them, he accepts that it happened and he expresses sadness for it, but he doesn't linger on it. When the other expeditioners don't necessarily vibe with him or they have conflict, his attitude is very much, okay, I've had plenty of friends. I don't need you to love me. I don't need you to do X, Y, or Z. I am living just fine doing what I'm doing. And judging from his typical disposition, we can draw through lines that his acceptance of loss would pretty much follow the same suit. Okay, it happens. We're gonna move on. And through the environmental and aesthetic storytelling from the journals of the other expeditioners, they went forward to the monolith, something happened, whether it be good or bad, and whatever the result was, they just lived whatever life they had left. There are some beautiful journal entries that you find of previous expeditioners that were unable to complete the mission, so they laid roots somewhere and just waited for the Gommage. They enjoyed whatever time they had left with each other and had a life and existed in that domain. We see in Expedition 60 the naked, buff expeditioners that through sheer force of will make their way to the Paintress and beat everyone up along the way, encounter Renoir, and send someone back to Lumiere to tell everyone about it. They never gave up at any point. They didn't find all of this struggle and give up. They just kept barreling forward. Expedition 78, with their frustration of not getting the war balloons that they needed to travel to the continent, just took them. They didn't have time to sit around and decide what the best option was. They just accept that this is what they have to do, so they're going to do it. We don't see any sort of denial process about what they need to do. The expeditioners just go forward. For those that come after is their constant slogan and motto. And through all this long-winded explanation, we can understand that Verso is at peace with everything that has happened. So now going to the topic of this video, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. The only wrong part about the grief process is when you impose your idea of how someone should grieve upon them. And that's what we see very clearly happen between Renoir and with Aline, is that Aline is not grieving the way that Renoir needs her to. He needs her to grieve outside of the canvas. He needs her to stop playing with this painted family. He thinks that this is disrupting her healing process, because his healing process is to focus on everybody else. His healing process is to decide other people have to grieve his way. He ropes in Clea and makes her come and fight against his wife. Whether she has consciously made that decision or if she was manipulated in doing so, whatever her reasoning is, he looped in his flesh and blood to take care of this, because Renoir was unable to do so himself. He was unable to get his wife to listen to him. That's very classic marital problems that are happening here. This husband and wife cannot have a civil conversation to come to a meeting place and decide what the best route forward is for both of them. And so they involve their family and they get their kids caught up in the middle of it. We see children of divorce have to deal with this, where they're the ones who are sort of mediating between both parents, and the kids have to be the adults in this situation. So we very clearly see they have communication issues. And throughout the end game, where Renoir is saying, we are going to get your mother and you out of this painting and then we're going to destroy it. When Maëlle says, no, this is my new home, you can't destroy this, you can't destroy the last thing of Verso, Renoir's first thought is, we need to, because I said so. This is not good for any of you to be here. But he never had powers of painting. That was taught to him. He doesn't know the rules of how the canvas works. That would be Aline's specialty. She was the one who taught the family how to interact with this, so she would have the most knowledge about how this all works. Renoir is essentially talking out of his ass in this situation, because these are not innate abilities to him. So what he knows about the painting is only what he's inferring. He knows that his wife is spiraling mentally, so he's made the assertion that it's the painting's fault. He hasn't sat back to think, maybe she's here in this universe that is helpful for her, because maybe I as a husband am not doing my job correctly. We can discern from their relationship, and what we hear nuggets of is that the family on a whole is not stable. The family on a whole is cordial with each other, but they very clearly are not good at communicating. And this unhealthy dynamic, I would want to escape too. If I could create a world that I could exist in, where my spouse could be perfect and everything I needed them to be, if I could choose to have my spouse go from someone who selfishly tells me that I need to live my life in a certain way, but then I could have a version of them that defends me, defends my family, defends my life, like Painted Renoir does, where he stops the expeditioners from going at her. She's literally created this fantasy version of her life where her kids are always with her and her husband doesn't fight her. He fights for her. And Renoir, looking at all of this from the outside, doesn't put two and two together, that maybe he's the one who is causing her more pain. Had he not doubled down and not listened to her and tried to force her out of the canvas, maybe she would have left much sooner. But she stays here crying at the monolith day and night about her son that she's lost and not being able to be with him because her husband distracts her and doesn't let her grieve the way that she needs to. And even when he has a moment to listen to her, he chooses not to. Her proxy at the end of the game is Mael. Mael sort of speaks for her mom. This is Verso's canvas. We have to leave it as is. We have to have this place that we can come back to so that those of us who need it can. We can have a little piece of him and always refer back to it when we need it. But we can leave whenever we want. Please just listen to me, Dad. I just need you to listen that we can regulate our own emotions and make our own decisions as adults. Please let us do that. And he acquiesces, I think only because he assumes that Mael is going to do what he wants her to do, which is to destroy the canvas. There's no true good ending. If you keep the canvas, there are plenty of negatives. If you destroy it, there are plenty of negatives. There are so many more discussions that could be had, even about the expeditioners within this painted world, that we see Gustav's depression come through when he thinks he's lost Mael, his anger. We see CL's darkness come out when she loses her husband. We see Luna sort of barreling forward and ignoring that there's problems. We even see Minoko, for a short period of time after losing Noko, doesn't want to keep reviving him. He's already done it so many times. He keeps trying to get back this version of his former mentor. Whereas we see Eskie just vibing and having a good time. There's even more to pull out nugget-wise from each one of those characters and to look deeper into their psyches and how that reveals even more about Verso, who created this world and created the rules of it. That even though they are free-thinking individuals, they also represent a fragment of Verso's being. And now that we're near the end of this discussion piece, I think this is the most interesting part of the game, beyond the striking visuals and through the incredible music and the battle style that is quite simply perfect. There's this underlying story of sadness that trails everywhere. Through each piece of reality, through each storyline is carefully woven this dialogue about grief and loss and how the characters in this world are trying to navigate their way through it. This is such a brilliant game for many, many reasons. But the way that it navigates this conversation, I think, is the most impactful to me as someone who is so interested in psychology and how the human mind processes loss at this level and comprehends grief. And it's brilliantly done in a Majora's Mask kind of a way, where you see each one of these grief cycles represented within the different zones that you enter. Now, a lot of games, I think, want to discuss mental health, but not a lot of them are able to do so adeptly. And I think that's where Expedition 33 thrived, is in being able to have this very heavy and big conversation and bring it into bite-sized amounts. We have all experienced grief in one way or another, whether that be from a death or a loss of a friendship to just a relationship falling apart, but the person is still alive, you just don't see them anymore, and you have to process that they're not around. We've all dealt with that, and the way that the game chooses to navigate these conversations, I think, are not only brilliant but also beautiful. And I love the devs for including this in the background and allowing for a game that includes so much discussion. Thank you for watching this think piece video. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to subscribe. And if you'd like to check out my Twitch page where I live stream games multiple days out of the week, you can check out those links below. Thank you for watching. I will see y'all on the flip.
I hope you find peace.